The Increased Risk of Addiction in the Alaska Native Population by McKenna Julian. Minority groups often suffer at a greater risk for addiction, but in particular, Alaska Natives and Native Americans are disproportionately affected by addiction as a result of things such as community and quote-unquote genetics. Many factors increase Alaska Natives' risk to alcoholism and substance use. Harmful stereotypes often arise in the subject, causing young Native people to internalize this and create a bigger problem within itself. Often, other ethnic groups will turn to rehabilitation centers and counseling for help with addiction issues, but Alaska Natives have far less access to these resources due to living in small, rural areas. There has been many solutions that have been brought up, but none have been able to solve this issue. Some of these solutions that have been brought up are prohibition and increased law enforcement. As with any form of drug or substance that is considered harmful to the human body, such as tobacco, alcohol, and other harder forms of drugs, we know that using these substances can increase the likelihood of overdose, cancer, and disease by using these substances long term. In a study done on Alaska Native elders about the effects of drinking, there were results not only about their health, but how drinking changed their role in society. The study found that 8 out of the 10 participants discussed drinking consequences with their family members, either when they were growing up and they heard stories, or when they were adults and tried to quit drinking. In the words of one participant, credited their parents and grandparents for the wisdom of telling the entire family that drinking is not the right thing to do. Although 80% of participants in the study group grew up hearing about alcohol use and the consequences that comes with using, still many teens and young adults in this ethnic community continue to be more at risk for addiction. It was found that Alaska Native young adults aged 15 to 24 was over 4 times the rate for all U.S. races combined. Some of the biggest risk factors for alcohol abuse and substance abuse in general can be attributed to abuse and adverse childhood experiences. Some of these risk factors for AIs, American Indians, or Alaska Natives, both childhood physical and sexual abuse, are associated with higher lifetime rates of substance abuse and dependence. Specifically, between men and women, it was found for AI men, combined physical and sexual abuse can significantly increase the likelihood of subsequent alcohol abuse dependence. On the other side of the coin, it was found for AI women, sexual abuse and boarding school attendance seem to increase the odds of alcohol dependence. Some other factors, such as reservation status, harsh socioeconomic conditions, and family members' substance abuse problems, have also been identified as a contributor to substance use among AIs and ANs. Not only do these factors push young Alaska Natives towards substance use, the long-standing oppression of these peoples, it was found that much attention has been given to the concept of historical trauma, oppression, and colonialism for their role in the etiology of various mental health issues, such as substance use in the AI-AN population. The implementation of federal off-reservation boarding schools in the late 19th century, massacres, broken treaties, the loss of land, and forced relocations and coercive sterilizations in the 1970s have become a source of culture for the AI-AN people. There are many different ways to improve these risk factors. Some of these helpful things that communities and parents can do to prevent the youth from substance abuse include parental monitoring, perceptions of caregiver being loving, caring, and having a connectiveness, perception of parental and maternal warmth. The Firewater Myth. Considering there are many different risk factors that put Native youth at risk, and many things that some parents can't fulfill to stop their children from turning to drugs, however, these risk factors are not only attributed to harmful childhood experiences and abuse. Some Natives turn to substance abuse because of the stereotype and stigma around the Natives and drug use. The Firewater Myth is defined as the notion that American Indians and Alaska Natives, AI/ANs, are more susceptible to the effects of alcohol and more vulnerable to alcohol problems due to biological or genetic differences. This notion not only gives power to racism and harmful stereotypes, but helps young Natives internalize a stereotype that can push them towards substance use. Young natives holding the belief about their culture is problematic because holding this belief is associated with greater guilt for drinking small amounts of alcohol, lower self-sufficiency for avoiding heavy drinking, and a greater heavy drinking, and greater negative alcohol consequences. Not only do these stereotypes affect mental health, stereotypes also affect performance and regulation, the tendency to feel worry or anxiety over the prospect of conforming to a stereotype that is associated with one social group, which is called the stereotype threat. Proposed solutions. Amongst the struggle of all these different risk factors, there comes a discussion based on what resources Alaska Natives have if they are struggling with addiction and substance use. Many think the solution can be solved by stronger law enforcement, considering that this has been shown that there is a large correlation between alcohol and substance use with violent assaults and murders amongst other illegal and violent crimes. One of the biggest solutions to this addiction issue with Alaska Natives has been to completely prohibit alcohol use altogether, from the purchase to the usage. As we found earlier, it has been shown that many Native families practice and preach to their children about abstaining from substance use altogether. However, a study found that abstinence-based strategies were not associated with alcohol use and were associated with greater rather than fewer alcohol consequences for students who were average or high in belief in the biological vulnerability. With increased law enforcement, there was a prohibition of alcohol in many tribes in Alaska, but similar to the success rates of the prohibition in the 1920s, it was also found to be completely ineffective. Many would think that the failure of Prohibition Acts would be attributed to the lack of police presence to properly enforce local prohibitions. But this is harsh reality of the U.S. That we think prohibitions and even more violence and oppression could solve issues as sensitive as these ones. Having more police presence is also not entirely possible in some of the areas of rural Alaska because some of these tribes do not have easy access and some tribe members turn to buy liquor in different areas that do not have prohibition. Solutions that may have a better outcome. There are many different programs that can help treat addiction issues, some of these being addiction therapy, group therapy, outpatient therapy, and cognitive behavioral therapy, etc. These different programs can address so many different types of issues lying underneath addiction and usage. As mentioned earlier, the risk factors for addiction can be attributed to a lot to childhood abuse experienced along with historical trauma. The results of many programs do not solve every addiction issue, as there are many relapses within 5 years or more after patients attend these programs. But a study testing the results of these programs found that 19.25% were abstinent during the 5 years post-treatment. Although this may seem like a small percentile, it was also found that 49% were abstinent or reduced use during the 5 years post-treatment. Additionally, 53% receives further treatment after the program. These numbers do not show the treatment solves the problem of addiction completely, but treatment programs do seem to be a better option than the other side of the coin. Using only prohibition and increased law enforcement seems to only force Alaska Natives to find another way to find drugs or alcohol. And I wanted to share a video with you guys that is very relevant to this discussion.
Off. There are no untrainable dogs, just untrained humans.
Okay.
I wasn't really in the community, especially while I was using the opiates, Percocet specifically. I had gotten so deep with them, I could just feel the stares on me when I was using, and I kind of lost it for a while with the culture.
Gabe Stewart lives on a small island reservation with 800 other members of the Penobscot Nation in the heart of Maine, a state hit hard by the opioid crisis.
All rise.
He spent the last year and a half in a special tribal court program that takes an unconventional approach to helping criminal drug offenders overcome addiction.
Good morning. We're on record in the Penobscot Nation Wellness Court.
The Healing to Wellness Court is different from other drug courts. It was designed to meet the unique needs of the Penobscot Nation, which, like many Native American communities, struggles with issues related to substance abuse.
Most of the major crimes that are committed on the reserve involve substance use or abuse.
As with other drug courts, the Wellness Court gives offenders a path to having their charges dismissed, but it places special emphasis on reintegrating addicts back into their community by including them in Penobscot cultural practices and traditions.
When I first came in, we were wrestling with an Anglo-style court. People sat at 2 tables, prosecutors sat at a table, public defender sat at a table. That's not relevant to the community. The circle is relevant to the community. We took the tables out, moved them aside, and had individuals sit in a circle. We started to include the participants speaking, and as you see, they have some of the most amazing insights to offer.
With every bump in the road that you've hit, your attitude has just been like perfect. If my attitude was just half as good as yours when I came in, I probably still wouldn't be here. I definitely still wouldn't be here.
So proud of you, and anytime you need anything, just ask, because we want to see you succeed. One of the ideas I had was to add the cultural and historic program. We've done basket making, sweetgrass picking, we host sweats.
Last night we had a sweat lodge ceremony. Good to see you. You too. I don't know if it was the heat mixed with like the drumming. I don't know why, but the drum, it just connects with me. I can feel it no matter how far away from it I am.
By doing things in the community, people see somebody actively engaged, and it kind of changes the perception that, people can change.
While the opioid crisis has ravaged the country, rural Indigenous communities have been hit the hardest. Between 1999 and 2015, overdose deaths for rural Native Americans have increased more than 500%, compared to a 211% increase nationally.
We all know that there's trauma underlying why this is happening and why these behaviors are coming out. There's historical and there's personal.
I went from using maybe once or twice throughout the week to roughly every day, which became multiple times a day. I had to turn somewhere for money that I didn't have. My grandparents, I was actually pretty much stealing most of what I stole from them. They decided that enough was enough and that they needed to press charges.
When people are struggling with addiction, they have these crimes, there's this perception within the community of not maybe being welcomed or part of it, and nobody should have to feel like that.
More than 100 wellness courts operate in tribes across 26 states that use native practices to help people with addiction make a cultural recovery, which can be more effective than traditional treatment alone. In the Penobscot Court, if a participant successfully completes the intensive program, their criminal cases are dismissed.
When Gabe first came in, he was one of those individuals.
I just wanted to share a little clip with you guys from that video. I thought it was super cool to learn about. I just want to say thank you for watching my presentation. Here's my references, and you guys have a good day.